The grand conclave chamber stretched upward like the inside of a cathedral, and Commander Elena Vasquez had never felt so small in her entire life. She stood at the edge of the massive circular room, her plain gray uniform a stark contrast to the flowing robes and glittering armor worn by the alien delegates around her. 12 species, each one older than human civilization itself, each one watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open contempt. The Vorthani ambassador leaned toward his aide and whispered something that made them both laugh, and Elena did not need to hear the words to know they were about her. The infant species sends an observer, the Selendrith matriarch had announced when Elena first entered, her voice carrying that particular tone adults use when a child wanders into an important meeting. Elena had kept her face neutral and taken her assigned position near the back wall, far from the central platform where the real decisions would be made. Humanity had been spacefaring for only 80 years, and in the eyes of these ancient civilizations, that made Earth little more than a nursery world filled with clever animals who had somehow stumbled upon faster-than-light travel. The holographic star map that dominated the center of the chamber flickered and changed, showing the Orion corridor in sharp blue light. 3 systems lost in the span of 12 days, High Admiral Thesic of the Vorthani declared, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically at the map. The Kethra swarm has awakened from its dormancy cycle, and it hungers as it has not hungered in 3,000 years. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, and Elena watched as delegates shifted in their seats with obvious unease. The Kethra were nightmares-given flesh, a locust-like species that moved through space in massive swarms and consumed everything in their path. Planets, stations, ships, and anything made of organic matter became food for their endless hunger. "We propose a defensive coalition," the matriarch said, rising from her throne-like seat with fluid grace. "All 12 member species will contribute vessels to form a blockade along the Orion corridor, and we will meet the swarm with unified strength." Heads nodded around the chamber, and voices rose in agreement. It was a reasonable plan, Elena thought, watching the projected fleet positions appear on the map. The combined firepower of 12 spacefaring civilizations would indeed be formidable, and the Orion corridor was a natural choke point that would force the swarm into a direct confrontation. And yet, something gnawed at the back of her mind, a cold whisper that had kept her awake during the 3-week journey to Verath Prime. She had spent those sleepless nights studying every piece of data humanity had collected on the Kethra, and something about their movement patterns did not make sense. "The motion is proposed," Admiral Thesic announced. "Shall we proceed to a vote?" Elena's hand rose before she could stop herself. The chamber fell into confused silence, and dozens of alien eyes turned to stare at the small human woman in her plain gray uniform. "The human wishes to speak?" the matriarch asked, and Elena could hear the barely concealed amusement in her translated voice. "I request permission to address the council," Elena said, keeping her voice steady, despite the thundering of her heart. Whispers erupted around the room, and she caught fragments of translated conversation. "Does it even understand what we are discussing? How quaint that they sent a female of their species. Perhaps she needs directions to the observation gallery." Admiral Thesic made a sound that his translator rendered as laughter. "By all means, let the humans speak," he said, gesturing magnanimously. "It will be educational for her to learn how proper civilizations conduct warfare." Elena walked forward, her boots echoing against the polished floor with each step. The central platform seemed impossibly far away, and she felt the weight of 10,000 years of galactic history pressing down on her shoulders. These species had built empires, while humans were still learning to farm, and they had fought wars across stars, while Earth was locked in its first world conflicts. She reached the edge of the holographic display and stopped. looking up at the glowing map that showed the Orion Corridor and the three doomed systems. "Well?" the matriarch prompted, her tone suggesting she was humoring a child. "What wisdom does the infant species wish to share with us today?" More laughter rippled through the chamber, and Elena felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. But she had not come this far to stay silent. She had not spent 3 weeks buried in data, cross-referencing sensor logs and analyzing movement patterns, just to watch these ancient fools march their fleets into a trap. "With respect, counselors," Elena said, and her voice carried clearly through the sudden quiet, "your defensive line will fail." The laughter stopped. Admiral Thessic's 4 eyes narrowed, and the matriarch's elegant face twisted into something cold and dangerous. "Explain yourself, human," the admiral demanded, and all trace of amusement had vanished from his voice. Elena looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of 12 mighty civilizations, and she saw anger and offense and wounded pride. But she also saw something else, something that gave her hope, the courage to continue. She saw fear. These ancient species were afraid, and they were hiding that fear behind ceremony and tradition and contempt for the newcomer in their midst. They were looking at the map and seeing what they wanted to see, what their experience told them they should see. They were not looking at what was actually there. "May I manipulate the display?" Elena asked. The matriarch waved one delicate hand in permission, and Elena reached toward the holographic controls. The fate of billions rested on what she would show them next, and as her fingers touched the interface, she sent a silent prayer to whatever gods might be listening. The star map began to change. Elena's fingers danced across the holographic controls, and the star map began to shift and expand. The Orion Corridor shrank as the display pulled back, revealing more and more of the galaxy's spiral arm. And the assembled delegates watched with growing confusion as Elena zoomed away from the battle zone entirely. "What is she doing?" someone muttered. "Human incompetence," another voice replied. "She cannot even operate a simple display." Elena ignored them and continued working, her hands steady, even as sweat trickled down her spine. She expanded the map until it showed a vast region of empty space, far from the Orion Corridor. A dark void that the galactic charts labeled as the Hollow Expanse. "There is nothing there," Admiral Thessic said impatiently. "That region has been surveyed 100 times over the millennia, and it contains no habitable worlds, no resources, and no strategic value whatsoever." "You are correct, Admiral," Elena said, still working at the controls. "Your surveys found nothing there." She pulled a small data chip from her uniform pocket and inserted it into the display interface. "But our surveys found something very different." The map transformed. Where there had been empty darkness, 17 massive signatures suddenly blazed to life, each one pulsing with a sickly amber glow that made the holographic stars around them seem dim and cold. The chamber went completely silent. Elena watched the alien faces around her as they processed what they were seeing, and she saw the exact moment when understanding arrived. Eyes widened, breath caught, and the color drained from faces of every species represented. "Those energy signatures," the matriarch whispered, her voice barely audible. "They match the profile of Kethra hive mothers," Elena confirmed. 17 of them, hidden in the dark between the stars where no one thought to look. Admiral Thessic rose from his seat, his forearms trembling. "That is impossible," he declared, but his voice lacked conviction. "Our sensors would have detected them." "Your sensors were designed to find what you expected to find," Elena replied. "Planets, ships, stations, the things that civilized species build and use. The Kethra do not build, they grow, and their hive mothers emit energy signatures that your systems classified as stellar background noise." She gestured at the display, highlighting the 3 attacking swarms in the Orion corridor. "These attacks that have consumed your frontier worlds are not the invasion," she said. "They are the distraction." Elena input another command, and projected flight paths appeared on the map. Curving lines that showed where the hidden fleet would emerge if it continued on its current trajectory. The lines bypassed the Orion corridor entirely. They curved around the proposed defensive position and emerged directly behind it, cutting off the core worlds of the Council from their assembled fleets. 40,000 ships, Elena said quietly. "That is our best estimate, based on the energy output of the Hive Mothers. They are not migrating toward food. They are executing a pincer movement." She let that sink in for a moment before continuing. "Your defensive line will hold the Orion corridor," she said, "and while your fleets wait there for an enemy that will never arrive, the main swarm will sweep through your undefended homeworlds and consume everything you have built over 40,000 years." The silence in the chamber was absolute. Elena could hear the soft hum of the environmental systems and the distant pulse of the station's power core. Sounds that had been buried beneath the noise of conversation and debate just moments ago. No one was laughing now. "How?" the matriarch finally asked, and her voice had lost all its condescension. "How did your species detect what we could not?" Elena considered her answer carefully. The truth was both simple and complicated, and she was not sure these ancient beings would understand it, even if she explained it perfectly. "Humans are a young species," she began. "We have only been in space for 80 years, and we know that we are small and weak compared to the civilizations that came before us." She looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. "But we did not come from a gentle world," she continued. "Earth was a place of predators and disasters and enemies hiding in every shadow. We survived because we learned to watch for threats that others might miss." Elena gestured at the data still flowing across the display. "Our sensors are not more advanced than yours. In many ways, they are far more primitive. But they were designed by a species that spent its entire existence knowing that something was always trying to kill us." She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. "We scan everything," she said. "Every patch of dark space, every quiet corner, every place where something might be hiding. We do not trust empty space, because on Earth, empty space was where the predators waited." Admiral Fessix stared at the map, his face gray. "You are saying that our own advancement blinded us," he said slowly, "that we stopped looking for threats because we believed we had conquered them all." "Yes," Elena said simply. The matriarch rose from her throne and descended the steps to the central platform, her flowing robes trailing behind her like liquid silver. She stopped beside Elena and looked at the human woman with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "The Kethra have always been animals," she said. "Dangerous animals, yes, but animals nonetheless. They do not plan, they do not strategize, they simply consume." Elena nodded. "That is what your records say," she agreed, "but look at what they are doing now." She highlighted the attack patterns, the positioning of the Hive Mothers, the timing of the diversionary strikes. "This is not animal behavior," Elena said. "Someone taught them, or someone is controlling them. But either way, the swarm that is coming for you is not the same swarm your ancestors fought 3,000 years ago." The matriarch studied the map for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was heavy with a weight that Elena could barely comprehend. "You are telling us that we face an enemy we do not understand," she said. "An enemy that has been watching us, learning our weaknesses, and preparing this attack for who knows how long." "Yes," Elena said. The matriarch turned to face the rest of the council, and Elena saw something she had not expected to see in those ancient eyes: respect. "The human has shown us the truth of our situation," the matriarch announced to the chamber. "Our defensive plan is worthless. Our enemy is not what we believed, and we have 11 days before the true invasion begins. She turned back to Elena. You have opened our eyes, Commander Vasquez, she said. Now I must ask you a question that no member of this council has ever asked a human before. The chamber waited in breathless silence. What do you propose we do? The question hung in the air, like a blade waiting to fall, and Elena felt the weight of every eye in the chamber pressing down upon her. She had come here as an observer, a representative of a species so young that the council had not even bothered to learn her name before today. Her orders had been simple and clear: watch, listen, learn, and report back to Earth Command. No one had expected her to speak. No one had expected her to matter. I am not authorized to propose military strategy to the council, Elena said carefully. My government sent me only to observe. Admiral Thesic made a sharp sound of frustration. We do not have time for political games, human, he snapped. You have shown us that everything we believed about this war is wrong, and now you hide behind procedure? The Admiral makes a valid point, the matriarch said, and though her voice remained calm, Elena could hear the urgency beneath it. Whatever authority you lacked when you entered this chamber, Commander, I am granting it to you now. She gestured to the assembled delegates. This council recognizes Elena Vasquez as a temporary advisor with full speaking privileges, she declared. Does anyone object? Silence answered her. Elena looked around the chamber and saw something that would have been unthinkable an hour ago. 12 ancient species waiting for a human to tell them what to do. Before I can propose a plan, Elena said slowly, I need to know more about the Kethra. Your records say they are not intelligent, but what I am seeing suggests otherwise. The matriarch nodded and gestured to one of her aides, who began pulling up historical files on the display. The Kethra are a biological weapon, the matriarch explained. They were created approximately 8,000 years ago by a species called the Yenth. Images appeared on the holographic display showing a tall, angular species with pale skin and dark eyes. The Yenth were ambitious and aggressive, the matriarch continued. They believed that the council was holding them back from their rightful place as rulers of the galaxy, and when diplomacy failed to achieve their goals, they turned to war. More images appeared, showing devastating battles and burning worlds. The war lasted 200 years, Admiral Thesic said, taking over the explanation. The Yenth created the Kethra as a living weapon, a self-replicating swarm that would consume the Council's worlds, while the Yenth themselves remained safely behind. What happened to them? Elena asked. The Admiral's expression darkened. We destroyed them, he said simply. Every ship, every colony, every world they called home. The Yenth were erased from existence, and the Kethra they created were driven into the outer darkness to starve. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. You committed genocide, she said quietly. We did what was necessary to survive, the matriarch replied, and there was no apology in her voice. The Yenth would have done the same to us, and worse. Their Kethra had already consumed dozens of worlds before we stopped them. Elena looked at the display, at the image of the extinct Yenth frozen in time. And now the weapon they created has returned, she said. But who is controlling it? The chamber fell silent again, and Elena saw the delegates exchange uncomfortable glances. We have begun an investigation, the matriarch admitted. Our preliminary findings suggest that the Yenth may have left behind automated systems designed to activate the Kethra and direct them toward our worlds. A dead species is attacking you from beyond the grave, Elena said. They programmed their revenge and waited 8,000 years for you to forget the danger. It appears so, Admiral Thesic confirmed. We have also discovered that several of our long-range sensor networks were sabotaged decades ago, presumably by Yenth sleeper programs hidden in our systems. Elena nodded slowly, pieces falling into place in her mind. They blinded you, she said. They made sure you would not see the attack coming until it was too late. She turned back to the map and studied the position of the hive mothers in the hollow expanse. Your enemies spent 8,000 years preparing this moment. They knew exactly how you would respond to a Kethra awakening, and they planned around it. Which means our standard military doctrine is useless, the matriarch concluded. The Yent studied us for centuries before their extinction. They know every tactic we have ever used. Elena felt a strange smile tugging at her lips. They knew every tactic you had 8,000 years ago, she corrected, but they did not plan for humanity. She turned to face the council. The Yenth never encountered humans, she said. They could not predict what we would do, because we did not exist as a spacefaring species when they designed their revenge. Admiral Fesick leaned forward. You have a plan, he said, and it was not a question. But I warn you now, counselors, it will violate everything you believe about proper warfare. Explain, the matriarch commanded. Elena took a deep breath and pulled up a new display showing Earth's defensive systems and tactical doctrine. On Earth, we have a military strategy called a fighting retreat, she began. It is used when you are facing a stronger enemy and you cannot win through direct confrontation. You run away, Admiral Fesick said flatly. We withdraw strategically, Elena corrected. We give ground, but we make the enemy pay for every step. We draw them forward, stretch their supply lines, tire them out, and then we strike when they are overextended and vulnerable. The Admiral shook his head. This is cowardice, he said. Proper civilizations defend their territory. We do not abandon our people to the enemy. Your proper civilizations are about to be destroyed, Elena said bluntly. The Yenth planned for you to stand and fight, because that is what proper civilizations do. And while you are standing and fighting in the Orion Corridor, 40,000 ships will sweep through your homeworlds and consume everyone you were trying to protect. She pointed at the map. You cannot beat them by being proper, she said. You can only beat them by being unpredictable. The chamber erupted into argument, voices rising in a dozen different languages as delegates debated and shouted and protested. But Elena noticed that the matriarch remained silent, her ancient eyes fixed on the human woman who had turned their world upside down. Tell us more, the matriarch said finally, and her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Tell us how humans wage war. Elena nodded and began to explain. The plan was simple in concept, but brutal in execution. And as Elena explained it, she watched the color drain from alien faces around the chamber. Human destroyers would serve as bait. They were smaller and faster than Council vessels, designed for hit-and-run tactics rather than the grand fleet battles that the elder species preferred. They would intercept the hidden swarm when it emerged from the hollow expanse and draw it into a chase. You want your own ships to be hunted? Admiral Fesick asked in disbelief. You want to sacrifice your people as prey? We want to buy time, Elena corrected. Every day we keep the swarm chasing our ships is a day your civilians have to evacuate. Every system we can lure them through is a system that gets emptied before they arrive. The matriarch studied the projected battle plans. And while your ships are dying to delay the enemy, she said slowly, our main fleet will not be defending the Orion Corridor. No, Elena confirmed. Your fleet will circle through uncharted space using navigation data from human deep space probes. You will bypass the swarm entirely and strike directly at the hollow expanse. She highlighted the 17 hive mothers on the map. Kill the queens and the swarm dies, she said. Without the hive mothers to coordinate them, the Kethra will become what everyone always believed they were, mindless animals that will scatter and starve. It could work, Admiral Fesick admitted grudgingly, but the cost to your people. The cost to my people will be measured in ships and crews, Elena interrupted. The cost to your people will be measured in entire worlds if we do nothing. The vote was close, but in the end, fear won out over pride. The council approved Elena's plan, and within hours, the greatest mobilization in galactic history began. Elena spent the next 11 days aboard the command ship Eternal Vigilance, coordinating the desperate dance of retreat and pursuit that would determine the fate of civilizations. The human destroyer Relentless was the first to make contact with the emerging swarm. Commander Sarah Chen sent her final transmission as her ship dove into the mass of enemy vessels, weapons blazing. "We are drawing their attention," she reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Forward elements are breaking off to pursue. The corridor is clearing." Elena watched the tactical display as the Relentless vanished under a wave of Kethra ships, and she forced herself to keep breathing. Sarah Chen had known she would not survive this mission. Every human crew in the bait fleet had known the same thing, and they had volunteered anyway. "Second contact," the tactical officer reported. "Destroyer Defiance, engaging enemy scouts near the Velar system." The Defiance managed to draw away nearly 1,000 swarm ships before its engines failed, and Captain Rodriguez ordered his crew to evacuate while he piloted the crippled vessel directly into the pursuing horde. His sacrifice bought 3 more hours for the civilian transports fleeing the Velar colony. Third contact, fourth contact, fifth contact. The reports came in faster as the swarm spread out in pursuit of the maddening human ships that refused to stand and fight. Elena coordinated the retreat like a conductor leading an orchestra of death, directing each ship to draw the enemy in a different direction, stretching the swarm thinner and thinner across the void. On the 7th day, the destroyer Adamant made its final stand at the Carex jump gate. Commander James O'Brien had a choice: retreat through the gate and let the swarm follow, or collapse the gate and strand the pursuing fleet in a dead-end system. He chose to collapse the gate. The explosion took out his ship and 300 enemy vessels, but more importantly, it trapped over 2,000 swarm ships in a system with nothing to consume. They would starve within weeks. "Adamant is gone," the tactical officer reported quietly. "Jump gate destroyed. Enemy forces are contained." Elena closed her eyes for a moment and allowed herself to grieve. James O'Brien had served with her father during the Mars campaign, and he had taught her how to play chess when she was 12 years old. Now he was gone, along with everyone on his ship. "What is the status of the evacuation?" she asked, opening her eyes. 87% of targeted systems have been cleared. Civilian casualties are below projected estimates. That meant millions of lives saved. Millions of people who would not be consumed by the swarm because human ships had drawn the enemy away from their homes. It also meant that some people had not been saved, that some worlds had been lost, despite everything. Elena looked at the map and saw the trail of destruction the swarm had left behind, the worlds that had been stripped bare before the evacuation ships could reach them. Every one of those worlds was a failure. Every one of those deaths was on her conscience. But she could not stop now. On the 9th day, the Council fleet reached the edge of the hollow expanse. Admiral Thesic sent a message to Elena aboard the Eternal Vigilance. "We are in position," he reported. "The Hive Mothers have not detected our approach. Your navigation data was flawless. We cannot hold them much longer." The human bait fleet had been reduced to 7 ships, and the swarm was beginning to regroup. Soon, they would realize they had been tricked, and when that happened, they would turn toward the real prize. "Attack commencing," Thesic confirmed. Elena watched the tactical display as the Council fleet emerged from hyperspace directly above the 17 Hive Mothers. The creatures were massive, each one the size of a small moon, and they had been drifting in the darkness for millennia, waiting for this moment. They had not expected to be found. They had not expected to become the prey. The battle was short and vicious, and when it was over, 14 of the 17 Hive Mothers had been destroyed. The remaining 3 fled into the void, their swarms scattering behind them like leaves in a hurricane. Elena leaned back in her chair and let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 11 days. "It is done," Admiral Thesic reported, his voice heavy with exhaustion. The swarm is broken. Elena looked at the map, at the scattered remnants of the enemy fleet falling into chaos without their queens to guide them, and she allowed herself a moment of something that might have been hope. They had won. The cost had been terrible, but they had won. 6 months had passed since the Battle of the Hollow Expanse, and the galaxy was slowly beginning to heal. The scattered remnants of the Kethra swarm had been hunted down system by system, and the 3 surviving hive mothers had fled so far into the darkness that it would take them centuries to pose a threat again. The worlds that had been consumed would take generations to recover, but the survivors were rebuilding, and for the first time in half a year, people were beginning to speak of the future without fear. Elena stood before the mirror in her quarters on Vareth Prime, adjusting the collar of her new uniform. It was no longer the plain gray of a tactical analyst. The insignia on her shoulders marked her as something far more important, something that no human had ever been before. Ambassador to the Galactic Council. A soft chime announced a visitor, and Elena turned to see the matriarch herself entering the room with a gentle smile on her ancient face. "You look uncomfortable," the matriarch observed. "The uniform does not fit?" "The uniform fits perfectly," Elena replied. "I am not sure I fit the role." The matriarch laughed, a warm sound that Elena had come to appreciate over the past months. "You saved our civilization, Commander Vasquez," she said. "I cannot think of anyone better suited to represent humanity among the stars." "I did not do it alone," Elena said quietly. "The crews of the Relentless and the Defiance and the Adamant and all the others, they are the ones who saved you. I just pointed at a map." "You pointed at a map and changed the course of history. That is no small thing." She moved to stand beside Elena, and together they looked out the window at the glittering cityscape of Vareth Prime. "We have completed our investigation into the Kethra awakening," the matriarch said. "The Yenth left behind automated systems that were programmed to activate when we became complacent, when we stopped watching for threats. A dead species nearly destroyed you from beyond the grave," Elena said. "That is a terrifying thought." "It is a humbling thought," the matriarch agreed. "We believed ourselves to be the masters of the galaxy, and we were nearly undone by our own arrogance." She turned to face Elena directly. "Your species saved us," she said, "not because you were stronger or more advanced, but because you remembered something we had forgotten." "What is that?" Elena asked. "How to be afraid," the matriarch replied. "How to watch the darkness for things that might want to kill you. How to survive when everything around you is trying to ensure you do not." Elena thought about that for a moment. She thought about Earth, about the millions of years of evolution that had shaped humanity into what it was. A species that had learned to fear the dark because the dark had been full of predators. A species that had survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that should have wiped them out. "We never had the luxury of feeling safe," Elena said finally. "There was always something out there trying to kill us, and we survived by never forgetting that." "And now you have reminded us of the same lesson," the matriarch said. "The universe is dangerous, and those who stop watching for threats will eventually be destroyed by them." She placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. "Come," she said. "The council is waiting for you." The Grand Conclave Chamber looked different than it had 6 months ago. The same 12 species were assembled in the same circular room, but there was a new addition to the gathering. A 13th seat had been installed at the central platform, positioned among the other delegates as an equal. Elena walked toward that seat with every eye in the chamber following her. This time, no one laughed. High Admiral Thesic met her at the base of the platform, and Elena was surprised to see that the Vorthani warrior was holding something in his upper right hand. "Commander Vasquez," he said formally, and his voice carried to every corner of the chamber. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I present to you the seal of the conclave. He held out a medallion made of some metal that seemed to glow with inner light, and Elena accepted it with hands that trembled slightly. 6 months ago, I called you an infant, Thesic continued. I laughed at the idea that your species had anything to offer us. I was wrong. He met her eyes directly. You showed us the truth when we refused to see it, he said. You proposed a strategy that violated everything we believed about warfare, and when we doubted you, you proved us wrong with results that cannot be denied. He stepped back and gestured to the assembled council. Humanity has earned its place among the stars, he declared, not through conquest or accumulation of power, but through wisdom and sacrifice, and the courage to speak truth to those who did not want to hear it. The Council officially grants humanity a permanent seat in this assembly, she announced. Let the record show that this is the first new member species to join the conclave in 6,000 years. Elena stepped up to take her seat, and as she settled into the chair that had been crafted specifically for a human body, she looked around at the delegates who surrounded her. The Vorthani, the Selendrith, the other 10 species who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They were looking at her now with something she had never expected to see. Respect. Thank you for this honor, Elena said, and her voice was steady. But I want to be clear about one thing. The chamber fell silent. Humanity did not save you because we are better than you, she said. We saved you because we understand something that your long history made you forget. She looked toward the holographic star map that still dominated the center of the room. We came from the dark, she said. We evolved on a small world at the edge of a galaxy that did not care if we lived or died, and we survived because we never stopped watching for threats. She turned back to face the council. We know what lives in the darkness between the stars, she said. We know that the universe is not safe and that something is always trying to kill us. That is our gift to you, counselors. Not our weapons or our tactics, but our memory. The matriarch smiled. And we are grateful for it, Ambassador Vasquez, she said. Perhaps together, we will build a civilization that never forgets to watch the dark. Elena nodded and looked up at the star map, at the thousands of lights that represented worlds and civilizations and billions of lives. Among those lights was a small blue point near the edge of the galaxy, a world that had seemed so insignificant just 6 months ago. Earth was no longer a backwater. It was a torch against the void, a reminder that even the smallest light can push back the darkness. And as Elena took her place among the rulers of the galaxy, she made a silent promise to all the crews who had died to make this moment possible. We will not forget. We will never stop watching, and the darkness will never take us by surprise again.